station, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, it may have been a tough time for Theresa May, but according to the opinion polls yesterday, it's been an even tougher time with the electorate for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. You see, they have slumped in the polls. They're down 7 points over the course of the last few weeks, giving the Conservative Party a pretty comfortable lead. We're looking at 34% now for Labour. We're looking at 41% for the Conservatives, which, given how split they are, seems remarkable. But hey, there you are. And interestingly, Corbyn is losing support from both sides of the argument. He's losing support from Leavers, particularly in the north of England, and he's losing support from Remainers. In fact, the poll suggests that just under half of Remainers now would opt for Labour. And in the face of all of this, despite Mrs May saying that she's going to battle for Britain in Brussels, a news report that surfaced on the Mail on Sunday yesterday saying that a scenario that's been discussed in Downing Street is that Article 50 gets delayed. Theresa May then puts a new plan to the House of Commons and gets approval, albeit not approval in Brussels, you understand, but approval in the House of Commons. And then she holds a snap general election, which she holds on D-Day, the 75th anniversary of D-Day on June the 6th this year. Now, Downing Street themselves have said reports of this are 100% untrue. But I think, folks, we've learnt over the last couple of years that when things like that get said, they don't often count for a lot. And this has been met with some considerable anger. Boris Johnson, today writing in the Telegraph, said, "I object to an early election." Others, like Sajid Javid, saying much the same kind of thing, saying that it's unnecessary, that we don't need it. And, you know, the last thing we want, Sajid Javid says, the last thing we want is a general election. Yeah, but it's not you, mate, that's actually going to decide this. And on a Tory MP's WhatsApp group, I mean, really, lots and lots of anger. People saying they're furious. People like Conor Burns saying this sort of thing is very unsettling for colleagues. But, interestingly, the party chairman, Brandon Lewis, being asked again and again by MPs on this WhatsApp group, would he deny that there are preparations going on for a general election, refused to do so. He did, of course, say they're preparing for the local elections on the 2nd of May, but there's no denial about getting ready and planning for a snap general election. And given that this was the Prime Minister who completely ruled out an early general election and then held one, if you remember, in June 2017, I would suggest to you that anything's possible. And I wonder, you know, there might not be much of an appetite for a second referendum. That clearly has diminished over the last few weeks. But I want to know from you, do you have an appetite for a general election in June? And maybe you think, yep, we'd love to have our say in yet another election. Call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think, actually, we don't need this. All we need are our members of Parliament to get on and deliver Brexit as they promised they would do in their 17 manifestos, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe you feel a bit like Brenda from Bristol. Do you remember? She was the lady who was told in the street that a snap general election had been called by Theresa May in 2017, and this is what she said.
You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this. There's too much politics going on at the moment. Why does she need to do it?
Why does she need to do it? Well, Brenda, they're talking about her, perhaps the same person doing it again. And if that's how you feel, because that's how I feel, really, please, using the hashtag Farage and LBC, at LBC, tweet away. And, of course, Facebookers watching us live, you can comment too. Is there an appetite for another general election? And bear in mind, of course, that this is what Jeremy Corbyn has been repeatedly asking for. So maybe, I don't know, you're a Labour voter out there, whether Leave or Remain. Maybe you think actually a general election will sort things out. But if you are going to call as a Labour supporter, bear in mind these polls are suggesting that your leader's having a bad time. It was also interesting to see yesterday that his personal approval ratings as leader, which started off looking pretty dismal and then skyrocketed as we headed towards the general election, and then that amazing moment at Glastonbury when there he is up on the stage and 20,000 youngsters are singing, "Oh, oh, Jeremy Corbyn." And suddenly the guy was a rock star. Well, I can tell you that now his personal approval ratings are lower than they've ever been, and they're going down every single week. But maybe you still think, as a Labour supporter, a general election will sort this. To me, the idea that you extend Article 50 would show what a complete failure as Prime Minister she'd been, to then put a bogus deal to the House of Commons that probably won't get approved by Brussels, and then put it to the country. I mean, I frankly, to me, this would be political trickery of the worst kind. That is my view. Peter in Lancing says, "Oh no, another manifesto, another pack of lies. Oh joy." And actually, Peter, a lot of us feeling that with these manifesto promises parties make, they're just not worth the paper they are written on. Nigel, they should just flipping well get on with it. The job of getting us out of the EU, which is what the people voted for. They, the government, deliver. That's how it ought to be. Kathy, it should. At the moment, it's not really working out, is it? Mike is calling from Newham. Good evening, Mike.
Hey, how's it going?
OK, now, tell me, do you have an appetite for a general election on the 6th of June or whenever it may be?
Yeah. And
okay.
I think sooner the better, to be honest.
Right.
I think if you suffer from the Tory government, which a lot of people do now, you see record homelessness, record funding cuts for NHS, education, then I think people are crying out for one. If you're a Tory supporter who's maybe comfortable in their situation, maybe they're not. They don't want to have talk politics and that. But like I said, if you're suffering, then I think people are calling out for one.
Well, if you're in work, Mike, if you're in work, you could argue, couldn't you, that since 2015, one of the things that's happened is that people's tax thresholds have risen quite sharply, that we've seen fewer EU migrants coming into the country, and that's helped contribute towards a 3.3% rise in wages last year. I mean, for people working, Mike, they may not be well off, but they're a little bit better off than they were in many cases.
Well, I think a lot of the people you see in work are actually relying on benefits as well. And basically, I mean, there's a lot of Tory spin, wages have gone up or whatever, but you can't really spin people's living experiences. And for the majority of people, I can tell you that it's gotten a lot worse.
So you would see this,
I work in a school, actually, and I see every day the consequences of funding cuts.
So you would see this, Mike, as an austerity general election, yeah?
Yeah, not Brexit. And I'm to be honest, I vote Remain. I don't want a second referendum. I'm sick of Brexit. I want us to get on with it. I think there's a lot of focus on Brexit. I'll tell you why, because it's a very divisive subject. When you talk about austerity and homelessness and stuff like that, people unite around an idea that, it needs to end, we need to tax the rich more. Brexit is a very 50-50 thing, and I think the reason why it's kind of kept in the media so much, because Labour, first of all, have to take a very precise line not to alienate voters on either side. But I think if you watch Election Time, it's very divisive. But if you talk about homelessness and stuff like that, people agree on it.
So you think Jeremy Corbyn would do well in this election, do you?
Yeah, I do,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, Mike. No, thank you. Well, Mike there very clearly thinks there are issues other than Brexit that would be what this election would be all about. I would like a general election, but who would I vote for? I'm 100% for a WTO exit, and I'd only vote for a party that would deliver. Steve in Oxfordshire, yes, I think a lot of you feel that way. Bring on an election. Just can't wait to see MPs treated with the same contempt they've shown from us, says David in Walworth. David, how would you do that? Who would you vote for, or would you simply stay at home? Joe is calling from Edgware. Good evening, Joe.
Hiya, Nigel.
So, let's just take this scenario, Joe. Mrs May completely fails to get her withdrawal agreement through.
Sorry, is this a hypothetical?
No, because this is the premise.
No, this has already happened, but go on.
Well, OK, yes. All right, I agree with that. So Article 50 gets extended, and into that vacuum, she puts a deal to the House of Commons and then takes it to the country. Is that what you want to see?
I'm just trying to understand the reasoning behind it. So, presumably she'd take it to the country without having it agreed by Brussels.
Yes, that's right.
So the reason she's taking it to the country is to go back to Brussels with a strong mandate, right? That sounds so familiar because she tried that
Yes.
and that didn't work.
Yes. Yes.
I think if she needs to secure a mandate for her Brexit deal, the most obvious thing and the most precise way to do it is through a second referendum. I'm interested, Nigel, if there were a second referendum.
But
and
Joe, the point I'm
no deal-
making.
No deal was an option on the ballot paper.
Yeah.
Is that something you could support?
Joe, we've had a referendum. We've
Yeah.
had a general election that backed it up, and we've had 498 MPs vote for Article 50. And the real point here, Joe, is there's not much public appetite for a second referendum.
You say that based on what?
On opinion polls, when people are given a choice, and only 8% of the country choose a second referendum as their preferred option to sort out Brexit. Simple as that, Joe.
I don't think it's anyone's first option, but sadly we're running out of options.
Well, we
I
have,
don't thi-
we have the
I mean, I keep-
we have the
go on.
WTO option. 500 MPs, 498 MPs voted for Article 50, and that was to have a withdrawal agreement or just to leave. So that's still very much an option, Joe, isn't it?
It's an option, but I don't think anyone can say that the referendum campaign, people voted for no deal.
Well, they voted. Well, Joe, it's a separate debate. I'm going to move you on. I know there are people who are passionate about a second EU referendum, but the point I'm making is there is not a great public appetite for it. That's why the amendment was withdrawn in the House of Commons last week. But is there an appetite for a general election? You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC at 6:15, and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Rumours of a snap general election being planned are not being denied by the Conservative Party chairman, Brandon Lewis. Is there an appetite for a summer general election? I don't believe there is, but please tell me I'm wrong. 03456060973. And a fascinating development today on the Irish backstop, because the former Northern Ireland First Minister, David Trimble, now Lord Trimble, is threatening to take the government to court over the backstop. You see, we've been told by everybody that we have to have the backstop to protect the Good Friday Agreement. Not, of course, that the EU had anything to do with negotiating it. Trimble and others are arguing that they may well go for judicial review over an alleged breach of the Good Friday Agreement. They're saying the backstop actually contradicts the Good Friday Agreement because the Good Friday Agreement talked there about any changes that are made needing consent, and people have not directly been asked about this. And if you remember, during the referendum, the Irish border was not discussed very heavily at all. So a very interesting development there from Lord Trimble. Lots and lots of thoughts and views. I believe an appetite for a second referendum has diminished, but, I get tweets saying there's a great appetite for a second referendum. Well, maybe there is with some, but it doesn't strike me. It's certainly nowhere near majority. It's a real minority viewer's first choice. But who wants a general election? If a general election results in the Conservatives and Labour being trashed for being anti-democrats, then bring it on, says Steph. Well, Steph, that's great. Do tell me, Steph, who are you going to vote for? Will you just stay at home? I mean, how will this anger manifest itself? That's what fascinates me. David is calling from Liverpool. Good evening, David.
Yeah, hi, Nigel. I think it makes sense, Nigel. I think what's happened is Gove has said to May, after the Brexit thing, I want an election, and he'll be the Prime Minister. For that.
This is interesting, David,
I think
isn't
that's the plan.
Because Theresa May, if you remember a few weeks ago, she was
Yeah,
up,
they were all legging it, but she stayed.
She was up well, there was that issue, but the other issue was, of course, part of the reason that she did stay and didn't get turfed out is she promised the 1922 committee that, all those backbench Tory MPs, that she would not lead the Conservative Party into the next general election in 2022. Now,
and I think they will get through a deal at some point, in the March thing, and then Gove will she'll hand the reins to him with the new election, because I don't think she can just give him the prime ministership.
No,
because that just would be chaos, and I think they want to get rid of the DUP as well, because let's face it, like Trimble, they're just trouble,
Well, you could argue, David, they're very principled people, and I think a lot of people have huge respect for David Trimble as being somebody, who helped get that peace.
He's done a great job last time.
That peace agreement into place. But David,
supposing
you're wrong, all right? Supposing there is no deal agreed by Parliament between now and the end of March, in those circumstances, would it make sense to have a general election?
I think so as well, yeah, because then you're going to say, okay, let's start again. Let's see who you want to run this country, whether it's Labour or whether it's Conservatives. Again, Michael Gove is still going to be the one to run for that premiership.
And tell me, which side is Michael Gove on now? Is he a Brexiteer or not?
Do you know what? I think he'd have to be. But I also think
I was being a bit sarcastic, David.
So,
I was being a bit sarcastic. There are many Brexiteers. Many Brexiteers think he's sold out a bit.
yeah, but I think he's just like everyone. You have to do a bit of a deal to get along. Do you know? I mean, you can't have you know the deal. You can't have everything your way. Especially now, there's a lot of stuff coming out which.
No. And you think Gove will reach the top job, and is that because you support him, David?
No, but I've seen along. He stood by Mrs. May when everybody else run away, you know, a few months back, and everyone presumed he was going to run away too. Remember, and I know they've done a deal where, listen, I'll stay, no matter what.
David,
I want to be the Prime Minister.
I disagree with you completely. I don't think Gove will become Tory party leader. I don't think Gove's personal ratings in the country are that good. I think he's seen, fairly or unfairly, as being a bit of a backstabber. If I had to go and put a bet on, if I were a bet, well, because I am a betting person, but if I was to put a bet on, David, I'd go for Jeremy Hunt. David, thanks for your call. Chris is a new caller from Bournemouth. Good evening, Chris.
Yeah, good evening, Nigel.
So, are you there itching for a general election, Chris?
No, I'm afraid I'm not itching for a general election.
Right.
I think both parties are as bad as each other. Corbyn is unelectable when you think of some of the clowns he has on his front bench. And we've just completely lost faith in the Tories because they're simply a party of Remainers, and I think they're going to sell us down the river.
And yet, Chris, these opinion polls at the weekend suggesting a 7-point lead for the Conservatives.
Well, so they may, you know, but opinion polls aren't always right, are they?
No, absolutely not.
I think we've lost total faith in our politicians altogether. I mean, there are two sides to the coin. You could say, well, a general election would at least give us the chance to get rid of all those so-called Remainers who promised to give us the exit from the EU.
Yeah.
I was interested to one of your previous programmes a couple of days ago, where a chap was saying that he and his wife were so incensed that they were actually going to take to the streets.
Yes.
Well, you know, we're not the French. We don't do things.
I agree.
Right. Because if a lot of people did take to the streets, you know what demonstrations are like. There's going to be some of these anarchists and people who just want to smash.
Yeah, and extremists and goodness knows what else. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but we have an alternative. The people who voted exit have an alternative. And it's called civil disobedience. Now, it worked very well for Mr. Gandhi many years ago over the independence. The lifeblood of any government is money. And if we stop giving them our money, then they're going to think again and see that we're serious. We could withhold, for example, I don't mean spend elsewhere, I mean withhold our council tax. Those people who pay tax that are not on PAYE could withhold their income tax, etc. Much better than taking to the streets because,
but
it
would still be against the law, Chris, wouldn't it?
Well, it would be, but I mean, I think if enough people did it, they'd have a hell of a job hauling us all into court and putting us in prison.
Chris, I understand the logic, the illegal logic of what you're saying, but I just don't believe people would do it. But anyway, it's an interesting point of view. Chris clearly having given up completely with party politics, and he's not alone with that. A general election is fine with me. Give us the chance to get rid of some of the MPs. Yeah, but in favour of whom? No one seems to be able to answer that. Dara is a new caller from Dagenham. Good evening, Dara.
Good evening, Nigel. I am a fan. I must say, I love your work.
Well, that's
Thank you.
Very kind of you. Thank you and welcome. So, Dara, general election, are you rubbing your hands with excitement?
Not exactly, because, I have a question. Normally, when people talk to you or to any other politician, they say that there should be another referendum, there should be another voting. Don't you think that if there is another voting, it happens, then every time there is an election, be it general election or any other election, the losing party will come up with reasons to have another election and use this as an example.
Yes, I mean, we could have one every Thursday, Dara, couldn't we? You know.
Exactly.
Yeah,
No,
no.
It's about setting up an example. It's about the rules are made for a reason. And if we break the rule this time just because the losing party didn't like it for their own reasons, don't you think it will happen over and over and over again for everything?
I think there is a logic to that, absolutely. And I wonder, Dara, if there was a general election, if it did happen, you know, last time Mrs May had a massive lead. At one point it was nearly 25 points, and that just disappeared because there was a degree of Corbyn mania. Do you think this time, if Mrs May was the candidate, she would get a clear majority?
No.
You don't?
We have seen the weaknesses in her time and again. Even the way she talked. I would listen to her, I would look at her, and I'm like, oh no, you know, she could have said something else here, or she could have shown some of the confidence. But I don't think this will happen now, because if people are actually seeing what it is for, they would be able to see how weak she looks like at times. Her words are not that confident. She will keep on repeating herself over and over again.
No, well, Dara, I like you, I think another general election would probably have a very low turnout and be inconclusive. Thank you for your call. There is nothing stopping Mrs May standing in this election, as she said she would not lead the Tories in 2022. Yeah, that's exactly what I picked up from the notes of that 1922 committee. Thank you to Mark in Sunderland. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusive on LBC. It's now 6:30 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz. Is there an appetite for a general election amidst rumours that maybe the Conservatives are planning one if Article 50 gets extended, and they'll hold it on the 6th of June, the 75th anniversary of D-Day? I don't believe there's a great appetite for it, but quite a lot of you so far tonight are telling me that there is. And a story here that really does make my blood boil. Delegation of British MPs have been in Brussels today, and amongst the people they met are a German fella called Martin Selmayr, and he is the Secretary-General of the European Commission. He was put there very much by Jean-Claude Juncker. He's known as the Beast. He is a total EU fanatic, and he's told, as the EU's most senior civil servant, British MPs, that the UK must pay the 39 billion Brexit bill, even if there is a no-deal exit. Well, I tell you what, matey, you can just go and sling your hook. No deal, no 39 billion. It could not be clearer. He then went on to say that if we refused to pay that money, it would damage our future trade negotiations. So he basically trying to hold us hostage, trying to blackmail us. I don't think we should respond to this kind of behaviour. In fact, if you thought Juncker and Barnier and Verhofstadt were arrogant, unpleasant, out of touch and anti-British, you haven't met Martin Selmayr yet. Back to your messages, of which I have got literally hundreds flowing in here. I'm hearing talk of a snap election in June. It's the democratic thing to do, especially in the face of such big constitutional change. It's now clear what Brexit means, and a Labour government would also tackle so many broader issues. Well, Jamal, I think you'll find that the leader of the Labour Party believes in Brexit, so you've got a little bit of a problem there, have you not? Tyler from Huddersfield says, no general election, no people's vote, no backstop, no trust, no 39 billion, no deal. Well, that couldn't really be clearer. Trust has gone. How can we trust them to do what they promise if we elect them again? Keith in Liverpool, I'm convinced that if we had this general election in June of this year, we would see a very, very dramatic fall in turnout, rise in spoiled papers, but we may see other parties start to gain some votes. I just don't know. Ginger Tom thinks Corbyn will walk it and sort out this Tory mess. Well, I tell you what, Ginger Tom, have a look at what's happening to Mr Corbyn's support amongst both Leavers and Remainers. He's not doing very well. We have well past Pete Corbyn. Jay is calling from Barnet. Good evening, Jay.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
I was phoning up to say, I think it's just going to cause more confusion if you have an election, and the only reason to have an election would be because you don't want to invoke Article 50, or basically people slow Article 50 down, let's have an election, and then the manifesto will be to go against the referendum or to have a second referendum or whatever. But I don't see there's any point in it. It's just going to cause more confusion, division in the country, and there is enough as at the moment as there is.
I think, Jay, this would happen because she had completely failed to get her withdrawal agreement through. It would be a little bit of a smokescreen for the total failure of her government to do what it set out and told us that it would do. And, of course, in many ways, what she would be saying is, look, I know I've made a frightful mess of it, but this time I'm going to get it right. Please trust me again.
But having an election isn't going to do anything. All it's going to do is say, okay, well, I know we can't leave the EU. They won't let us. The EU's a dinosaur that's trying to snooker us into staying. That's all it is. The backstop is a paradox. The backstop paradox is what it should be. And I'd just like to say one thing about all of the amazing politicians, such as Vince Cable, when people say, oh, you were lied to. Could you have lied any more than saying, vote for us and we'll get rid of tuition fees, and then you don't join the Labour Party in coalition, you join the Tory Party?
Yeah, well, there you are.
He was the mastermind behind the trebling of the tuition fees and all of the Brussels sleet. I'd like to call them sleet because they are the kind of snowflake that doesn't settle, is not the elite, they're the Brussels sleet. They're just desperate to keep England in. And it's just an indication of the fact that they're a dinosaur on their way out.
Now, head of the dinosaurs in the EU civil service is Martin Selmayr, who I talked about a moment ago. Yeah. Jay, he says he wants 39 billion from us, whether we have a deal or whether we simply leave on WTO terms. Do you have a message for Martin Selmayr, Jay?
Yes, and the message is no thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I thought Jay controlled himself really rather wonderfully there. Let's go on to David in Dewsbury. Good evening, David. Are you itching for a general election?
Not really itching, but I think it could be the godsend that we need.
Go on,
First of all, thank you very much for what you did the other day in European Parliament.
Oh, David... Thank you for that. I have talked about it a bit in the last couple of days. By the way, David, I can update you, David, that just before I came on air, that had reached now 6 million views on YouTube, which is just the most extraordinary number. And as you may have heard, the BBC have chosen not to cover it, which I find bizarre. Yeah. But anyone listening that hasn't seen it and wants to see it, you can go to lbc.co.uk. David, thank you for that.
Can I just say to you as well, regarding the Labour Party, yeah?
Yep.
And we've got a massive vote for Leave in Dewsbury, Backley, all these areas around here, quite massive. And I don't think these Labour MPs know the actual anger that's involved here. And this is the thing that we need. We need it now because the last general election before the one that Theresa May called, you know, the snap one.
Yep.
They did everything. If I'm allowed to say it, the other TV channels, they did everything, Nigel, to stop you from being elected as an MP and some of your party, original party of UKIP, yeah?
Yep.
They did the best. They know what they did. They slandered lies everywhere. Now, I'll tell you something. There's going to be some Labour seats topple and some Conservative seats topple if there's an election called. Now, this is the time that you strike now. You've got to strike now. You must either sort something out with the party, whether it's Brexit party, or the British Patriot Party. That represents everybody who's patriotic to this country.
Isn't the problem, though, David? David, isn't the problem? And by the way, I'm fascinated by what you're saying, and I do understand why you're saying it. Yeah. Isn't the problem that what we saw, where I stood in the last general election, is now electoral law doesn't matter? The big parties can simply willfully, massively overspend the limits, break the rules to stop certain people having a fair opportunity, and they can do so with almost no penalty whatsoever.
Yeah, but do you know, you've been speaking about the disrespectfulness of some of these bureaucrats in the European Parliament, and to see the faces when you speak, and there's not many people can bring people to tears, because that's what it does when you're talking to them. And I've seen some hell in the last 40, 50 years, miners' strike, when we had it really tough. I've seen it. But I don't know why people can even turn around and say, oh, we hate Nigel Farage. Nigel's this. Hang on. We need somebody to bat for us. It's no good sending a weak football team over to Germany to play their star team. It doesn't happen. But if we do have an election and a general election comes, we all know the people to it.
Well, David,
Anna Soulbridge.
David, I want to thank you for your confidence in me. I did lead UKIP in 2014. We did get 4 million votes, which was a pretty amazing thing for us to do. In fact, we got more votes than the Lib Dems and the SNP implied added up together. But David, taking on the first past the post system may be a little bit harder than you think. Sheridan is a new caller from Kings Lynn in Norfolk. Good evening, Sheridan.
Hello, Nigel. It's a great honour to speak to you, Nigel.
That's very
kind. I want to thank you on behalf of the 17.4 million people for the courage that you still have in standing for what is right on this issue. Thank you.
That's good of you, but how would that translate to a general election, Sheridan?
Well, Nigel, I think it depends on who's the leader of the Conservative Party. If Theresa May goes into it, I don't think they've got a cat in hell's chance of getting anywhere. It would just add to more confusion. But if someone like Boris or Jacob Rees-Mogg is leading, I think they would have had a fantastic chance of clearing the decks. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. I think it would clear a lot of the decks. The MPs who have refused to carry out the will of the people, a lot of them will be deselected, and it could well be a much stronger Leave Parliament. That would be the decision of the people, not this Parliament.
Do you know what, Sheridan? I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to say this. If the Tory party ditched this Remainer who pretends that she's a Leaver and got somebody who had absolute clarity about where they wanted to take us, how they would honour the will of the people, what their plan was for the future, and they actually, Sheridan, stood there and said, I believe in Britain, because that's what I want to hear, Sheridan. That's what I want to hear. And if they did that, they'd win by a landslide. Sheridan, we're out of time, but thank you for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 6:45 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Raziz. Do you want a summer general election? Because it's rumoured this is one of the contingency plans being made by Theresa May's government, despite the fact they deny it. Now, Venezuela, of course, very much in the news over the course of the last few days. And the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Spain and other European countries have now today officially recognised the opposition leader, Juan Guaido, as the interim president of Venezuela. It comes after President Nicolas Maduro rejected a deadline they'd set for him to call fresh elections. 2 quick points on that. 1, it was Donald Trump that led the way on this, and now the European nations are following. And 2, have you noticed how this Juan Guaido looks and sounds in the way that he speaks very much like a young Obama? He's certainly got something when it comes to TV presence and oratory. Back to our question. David says Corbyn will probably promise a second referendum to win the election. David, I'm not sure that's an election-winning proposition. I really, really am not. Simon says, and how would a general election get us out of the mess your lot put us in? Simple, Simon. Very, very simple. I'll answer you using John from Burnham-on-Sea in Somerset. Yes, but not with Theresa May as leader. We need a leader who's a Brexiteer, someone like David Davis. That's your answer, Simon. The only thing a general election would solve is if we had somebody who actually believed in what they were doing, believed in Brexit and believed in the country. And they would, folks, win a landslide. I'm absolutely, totally confident of it. Nick quite rightly points out, local elections, now they're going to be on the 2nd of May already, local elections, a general election, and probably EU elections, all within 6 weeks of each other over the course of a summer, from a government that can't even deliver a 30-month-old referendum result. No thanks, just get on with getting us out of the EU. Nick, I'm absolutely convinced that overall is the majority position on whether there should be a general election, and indeed, I think, on what should happen to Brexit. And I'm getting this from all sides now. Even people on my side of the argument who hate the withdrawal agreement say, you know what, get rid of the backstop, I surrender, let's just do it, let's just get out, let's just get it over with and move on with our lives. Ross is a new caller from Holborn. Good evening, Ross.
Hello there.
Welcome.
Hello. I just think this is such a vanity project from Jeremy Corbyn. He wants a general election. Nobody else does. He hasn't even got a mandate with his party. I mean, we saw with the statistics that came out today, nobody in his party likes him, and the people in the country don't really. He wouldn't win an election. I just think it's a waste of time. That he's muddying the waters. The country's in a real state, and we just don't need a general election.
I don't think we do either, Ross, and you're right, it was Corbyn that's been calling for a general election over and over and over, but this current...
It's only Corbyn. Corbyn's the only one calling for it. Nobody else cares. If I can use an analogy with basketball, I love basketball. Do you like basketball, Nigel?
I'm not the biggest fan in the world, but go on, Ross.
So I just sort of see Europe as a sort of hoop, I suppose.
Yeah.
And the way they're treating us, because I don't know if you know, but in Germany they play basketball, but without the hoops. They just call it ball. And what I think it is what they do is that they use the hoop as a sort of as a bargaining chip, and we're the ball, and we can do whatever we like, and we're being forced to go in the ball. The analogy doesn't work great, but I just think it's a disgrace from Corbyn, basically.
All right, well, Ross, but maybe it's Theresa May who gets into so much trouble over her Brexit withdrawal agreement. She can't get it through the House of Commons. She won't take us down a WTO route. It could be her that brings it. Who knows? Paul is a new caller from Shoreham. Good evening, Paul. Do you want a general election?
Hell no. Good evening, Nigel.
Good
evening. It's a pleasure. Great deal of respect for you. I've got two solutions in my mind. What needs to happen?
Go on, then.
The one wouldn't be, who wants to extend to a general election? You need to have what isn't going to happen, and that's a fantasy government. You basically need David Davis as PM, Jacob as deputy, and somehow you on the panel as the Brexit minister, which I would love to see, but let's face it, we've got to be in the real world. My frustration, though, comes from the fact that we've taken knock after knock after knock. And this business as well with Niston and, it's about Brexit, when the fact is it's an X-Trail, it's a 4x4, whatever, big thing with diesel in it. We ought to be encouraging people to manufacture cars over here, but electric or hybrid. But the fact is that we've been saying now, okay, well, we'll stop buying your wine and cars. Actually, start doing it. At the end of the day, a lot of these EU cars aren't very good. I've had 9 BMWs. I've had to reject one of them. Cars like Kia and Hyundai are actually better quality and more reliable than the likes of Volkswagen, who are trading on their 1980s.
So you say we should sort of Brexit as consumers, basically, Paul?
I think we should, but also the government needs to do more. For example, this money that they're going to throw at Nissan, I mean, it's up for grabs. Okay, we lost Rover, and we don't want to go back to the days of British Leyland. But wouldn't it be great if the government invested a bit? The Chinese have a thing about British culture. It'd be great for them to start building their Roa or MG cars back in Britain.
Paul, I would be all for a pro-British manufacturing, a buy-British strategy. But the trouble is, Paul, we would need a Prime Minister who really believed in the country to do it, and it's not going to be Theresa May, I would put to you.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. But likewise, you see, I'm an audiologist, and I went to uni. I drove 90 miles a day for 3 years and a year in Wrexham. And great, I've got a profession behind me, and the government paid for that.
Yes.
But, what's going to happen now, moving forward? We know that there's all this scare story going on about, we won't get nurses and professionals in. I say stimulate investment in training in people here to go out to these manufacturing jobs or whatever else. And in the meantime, Paul, encourage people to come in from New Zealand, etc.
We need to train engineers, nurses, doctors. We shouldn't need to import people. Okay, we can take some of the best from all around the world, but we should be investing in our own people and our own future. Paul, thank you. Jacqueline is calling from Worthing. Jacqueline, would you like another election?
Nigel, I think it's our only hope. We need an election. We need some leadership in this country.
Okay.
We've just got nobody. People feel so disenfranchised at the moment.
All right.
There's nobody to vote for. And I think that the fact that she's leading in the polls gives her this terrible complacency. She's not leading because she's good. She's leading because the opposition's so bad.
So, Jacqueline,
I desperately want an election.
But, Jacqueline, okay, you want an election, fine. Let's give you an election. Where's the leadership going to come from?
Well, I'll tell you who I would put forward, and I don't actually like him, but I think he's the most intelligent person, and I think he's clever, and that's Gove. I don't like the way he shafted Boris, but I think he would be a really good leader. And I think the EU would stand up and take notice, because at the moment they're just laughing. They know how weak she is. They don't have to do anything to get what they want. If you have somebody else seizing the moment and going back there, they'd have a massive landslide, I'm sure of it.
Jacqueline, I absolutely agree. I think I really do believe that somebody who was absolutely committed to Brexit and could stand up and say it with passion and sincerity, if there was a summer election, would win it very, very comfortably indeed. But Jacqueline, they would need to say that if there was one more go at renegotiation with the European Union, if it failed, we would leave on a WTO 24 deal.
I couldn't agree with you more. And you know what? There's so many... Everybody I speak to feels the same. She just is completely detached from how most people in this country feel at the moment.
Yes, I think she is, and the polls say that Corbyn is too. Jacqueline, thank you very much indeed. Now, Andrea really wants to spoil everybody's evening by saying to me on Facebook, how about an election and a referendum on the same day? As Brenda from Bristol would say, oh no, not another one, and another one. I'm off to Brussels first thing in the morning. I'll report back tomorrow night what is going on there. So far, it appears to be no give, but I'll be back on air tomorrow night at 6. At 10 tonight, it's Ian Payne, but up next, it's Ian Dale.
You haven't quite got that Bristolian Brenda accent right, have you, Nigel?
No, I haven't.
Not another one.
Oh, very